Continuing completed classics. Fulfilling failed franchises. Reinvigorating reviled rehashes. It's the follow-up Showdown! With Paul Getz, Travis McMaster, and Lauren Kohne.
Hello and welcome to the follow-up Showdown 2 Nerds in Quarantine, where we continue to give worthy second chapters to stories that don't have them. I am your host, Shimmy Shimmy Coco Paul Getz, and now if this is the first time you're joining us, the way it works is we take a movie that either has no sequel or a sequel that comes up short of its original, and each try our hand at coming up with a better one. And when I say we, I am of course referring to myself and a guest. Today, that guest is none other than the Uniballer himself. You may know him as the creator of the Sandlerverse. He is the Sultan of the Supercut, wellspring of energy, as well as a dear friend and occasional co-writer of mine, Shimmy Shimmy Shawn Kohne.
Hello.
Hi, Shawn.
Hi, Paul.
How you doing today, Betty?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Getting to chat with you.
Nice.
That's pretty rad.
Yeah, I'm into it as well. The movie we are focusing on today is 2019's Little, the spiritual sequel to 1988's Tom Hanks classic Big. Now, this is the first spiritual sequel we've done on the show. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, a spiritual sequel is a movie that doesn't actually add to the storyline or even the universe of the first one, but connects to it with some of the same themes or elements and is in some way inspired by the pre-existing film. Few examples I came up with would be like the Cloverfield movies. Everybody Wants Some, the spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused. So that one's a little easier to track because they're both Richard Linklater. It's a weird, vague type of sequel idea, but I really wanted to do Big, and I felt like we couldn't without at least touching on Little.
We interrupt this program for the summary of two films.
Big. Josh Baskins is a 13-year-old boy with a happy life, a loving mother and father, a baby sister, and a rowdy best friend named Billy. One night, he is embarrassed at a county fair by being told he's too short to ride a ride in front of his schoolyard crush, an older girl who is already dating an even older guy. In his frustrated state, Josh comes across a magic fortune teller machine called Zoltar Speaks, which we know to be magic because it works when it's not plugged in, and after paying the obligatory quarter, wishes to be big. The next morning, he wakes up in the body of his 30-year-old self, played by Tom Hanks. He is able to convince his best friend Billy of the truth, but is not so lucky with his mother, who now believes that her son has been kidnapped by this 30-year-old man. Because the fair has moved on, Josh must wait several weeks to find where the Zoltar machine has gone, so he maintains the ruse of his own kidnapping and decides to get an adult job to pay his way. He gets hired at Macmillan Toy Company, where Macmillan himself was impressed by Josh's understanding of being a kid, and so he quickly climbs the ladder. This attracts the hatred of a man named Paul, played by John Hurd, and the attraction of a woman named Susan, played by Elizabeth Perkins. Susan and Josh fall in love and have sex, leading Josh to reconsider whether he wants to return to being a kid at all. But after being confronted by Billy, he does decide to go back. He tells Susan the truth. She doesn't believe him. Then she does believe him. After he wishes himself young again, Susan drives him home to where she watches the grown man she's been in a relationship with turn back into a child and finally reunite with his poor mother. Little. Regina Hall plays Jordan Sanders, who runs a tech company. She is a selfish, overbearing person who is a terror to her employees and refuses to commit to her perfectly kind and perfectly chiseled boyfriend. She is especially awful to her assistant, April, played by Issa Rae, who has app ideas but won't be heard by Jordan. One day, Jordan is rude to a little girl with a magic wand who curses Jordan following their encounter. The next morning, Jordan wakes up in her 13-year-old body. She enrolls in school for some reason, where she bonds with a group of ragtag kids who are victims of bullying like she was at this age. This should be what the movie is about, but it's not. Instead, it's about April taking Jordan around and not letting her do adult stuff. At the same time, it's about April running the company and proving herself to Jordan, all while dealing with her own crush on a handsome coworker. In the end, Jordan helps the kids become accepted by doing a dance with them at the talent show, and then goes back into her own body the next morning for no reason. She finally gives April the respect she deserves by promoting her, and also gives her relationship a fair chance. Literally nothing happens with April and her love interest, and Mikey Day plays one of the tech company's clients. Nice. Let's start with the fun part. Talk about Big.
Who said the other part's not going to be fun?
Yes, you're right. Talking about it, that'll be fun. Sitting through it. Now, Big, a seminal classic. Everybody loves it. Rotten Tomatoes score of 97%. I mentioned to you after we watched Big, I've seen it a million times as a kid. I had it pretty well memorized, but I haven't seen it since. And I was pretty impressed at how well it held up. It is one of a handful of movies that's close to perfect. I felt like it really benefited from having Penny Marshall direct. It made it a gentler, more sensitive story than perhaps it could have been. And I felt like it wasn't ultimately very problematic, especially given some of the dark, weird things that it deals with.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you made that movie now, it would be a lot weirder.
Yeah. I'm pretty impressed, we talked about, at how seamlessly it sort of avoids the darkest parts of itself. You made the point that it's because they don't focus so much on the mother's side of things.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you start to dwell on how horrifying that is, that her son has been kidnapped, has been like he's written letters that he's at summer camp.
That letter, God.
Yeah, the letter is horrifying. The letter's nuts. As an adult.
Yeah, I feel like I was old enough in watching this before to realize that it was funny, the letter he was writing, because it's like he's not totally taking in the full scope of the situation. He's just trying to, like a kid, make his mother think that he's doing everything she'd want him to do. But it is, whew.
It's also really interesting, too, because, like, you also never see the dad. You never see Mr. Baskin. But he clearly exists because the baby is very new and he takes his dad's clothes. But, like, even when the police are there and Billy's escaping to give him his dad's clothes.
I had forgotten Mr. Baskins is even in it at all. You do see him at the fair because they're wearing the hat.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But I agree that I had forgotten he was in it at all. And then this time I realized, oh yeah, he is in it, but never once the movie gets started.
Yeah. Well, see, again, you're avoiding the sad tragedy at home, and you're just focusing on this whimsical journey of this kid in an adult body.
Yeah. And they're still able to do it without completely erasing the weight of that side of things. When you do see the mom, it is heavy and it is sad, and she is like losing it. It's pretty far. It's close to the end that you finally see her talk to Billy. I would say that scene is, they even avoid, like, they show that she's sad and that Billy's trying to make her feel better, but then Billy, like, immediately is like, good night, closes his window. She's gonna go in and cry.
Yeah.
Cry all night.
Poor Miss.
Yeah. Great performance, what we get of it. She's fantastic.
Sure. I mean, it's when Josh comes back in and tries to explain it to her, like, her freaking out is wonderful. And I love a little bit about him being like, oh shit, I forgot my shoes. I forgot
to wipe the shoes.
So funny.
That part, even though that's dark, it's funny because of his naivete in the situation. So the movie was nominated for Best Original Screenplay. The writers are Gary Ross, who wrote Dave, Pleasantville, Seabiscuit, The Hunger Games, and Ocean's 8. Bit of a mixed bag, but Dave and Pleasantville, come on. And then Anne Spielberg, sister of Steven Spielberg, who has no other film writing credits.
Huh.
Pretty cool. Before coming to Penny Marshall to direct, it was first offered to John Landis, then Richard Donner, Frank Oz, Ivan Reitman, Amy Heckerling, and John Hughes, all of who turned it down. But because of this movie, Penny Marshall became the first female director to ever direct a movie that grossed more than $100 million.
I did.
Pretty freaking rad. Yeah. That is one thing that Big and Little share in common, is they have kind of cool backstories when it comes to some of the people behind them. But we'll get into that. Some of the actors' notes that I came across were big, that were pretty interesting. Tom Hanks was the first choice, but when they first approached him about it, he was committed to Dragnet. After which, for a while, Robert De Niro was attached, but his salary demand went up to $6 million, at which point they opted to wait for Hanks to become available because he accepted the $2 million that they originally offered. Because of the Robert De Niro attachment for a while, David Moscow, who played young Josh, was originally cast as Billy, but when casting switched to Hanks, they switched him to young Josh. And then other people considered for other parts. Deborah Winger was offered Susan, but she had to turn it down because of pregnancy. She suggested Elizabeth Perkins. And for Paul, the only other actor I could find who was also considered was John Lithgow, which would have been pretty great. Although I had also sort of forgotten to some extent how fantastic John Hurt is in this movie. And he was another part that, like, as a kid, it was easy enough for me to just think him as the simple bad guy. But putting it into perspective a little bit more, I do understand his perspective.
Sure.
Especially up to the paddleball scene. Like, at the paddleball scene, he's kind of shows his true colors of just being a real grade A asshole, but up to then he's like, his world is being ripped down by this guy. And some of my favorite drunk acting ever, that scene where he's just blitzed on the party. Yeah. Seaweed. You know, this, of course, was Hanks's first Oscar nomination. Well-deserved. Apparently, to give him an idea of how a 12-year-old would behave, Penny Marshall filmed the grown-up scenes, or at least some of them, with David Moscow first, and then Hanks would watch it back and mimic the actor's behavior, which sounds like an amazing thing for that actor to do for the course of that whole production.
For sure, yeah, that's pretty crazy. I mean, also, you know, that's like whole other days of shooting.
But maybe part of it was like a Band-Aid for, oh, you're not Billy anymore. Like, you don't have as big of a role, but you're super important. And he is. I mean, he's great. Some other fun facts about the movie. According to Robert Loggia, there were doubles standing by to get the piano playing shots correct if Tom and Robert couldn't. So they made it their goal to practice enough so that they would nail it, and they did.
Nice.
Yeah. So those are all the right notes. That piano, the famous one that inspired the idea, Adolphe Schwartz, wasn't big enough for the two men. So Penny Marshall called the inventor of that toy and had him design one long enough for the movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So what was your experience with Big? I mean, I know I asked you to do this one because we're both massive Hanks fan. We've bonded a lot over our Hanks love. But I mean, I can't remember not having this movie around.
Just a movie that I watched growing up. And, you know, and then there was like a span of time where, you know, because like when you're a kid, when you're growing up, you typically just watch the same stuff over and over and over again. Then,
oh, yeah.
As you grow older, you're like, oh, well, you know, I can expand things. And then you forget about the stuff that you watched when you were kids. And then you're like, oh, well, I'm in my mid-20s now. And then it has a whole new world because you're not seeing it as, you know, through child eyes.
One thing about Big that I think it registers with adults and bring them back to childhood, but it really effectively has to register with kids because there's a bunch of these movies, and I guess a lot of them register with kids, but there's a bunch of these movies like body switch movies or the kid inside the adult inside the kid. But Big is really, like, when I think about it, the quintessential child in an adult body fantasy. Like, everything that happens to Josh as the adult version of himself is like a kid dream. He works at a toy factory. He gets to have sex early. He gets to deck his apartment out like a kid would.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it's able to do it, I think, even with the sex stuff, pretty innocently. You know, Josh Baskins, as the way they create him, yes, he talks about girls and stuff with his friend and stuff, but he is a complete innocent. And in the sweetest ways every time. Like, in no way is he a shitty kid.
Well, yeah, and especially sexually, even though he's interested in girls, and he talks about it with Billy when they have the baseball cards, but when Susan is very clearly hitting on him and, like, asking to sleep over, it's just every one of them over his head. Zoom, zoom, like he's not catching anything.
Which is, it's funny because he clearly, I think at that point, he is developing a crush on her. But just looking at it through kid eyes, it's like it doesn't register
Yeah,
as it could possibly be the other way.
Well, he's developing a crush like a kid would, not like an adult would, because an adult would be like, well, sleeping with this woman right now. But that's like not a thought that even comes into his head.
Oh, going back to the fact that Robert De Niro was attached to this movie for a little while, it made me realize that De Niro and Hanks have never paired. And it's something I've never thought about. But I think that their styles would play very well off of each other. The only way to think about it now is like two grandpas competing over something. I mean, that sounds shitty, but somehow that could be good. I don't know, those two guys playing against each other and then teaming up at the end. I don't care what the movie is. I'm already excited. Yeah.
The pairing would be interesting.
And one thing, oh boy, we gotta put this on the air because we started talking about this a little early via text. You were talking about the scene where he is going to have his date with Susan and he blows Billy off on his birthday.
Yeah.
You said it seemed apparent that he wished on his birthday cake to have sex with Susan.
That's how I read it.
Well, and I agree. I agree that is what he's makes that little naughty face.
Oh yeah. It's a sly, naughty face that he makes.
Yeah. So then that made me realize for the first time how weird it would be for you as Josh Baskins to make a wish of any kind on your birthday or any time after that first one. And then that gave you the even bigger realization that in this movie he gets 3 wishes granted.
Yeah.
It breaks it up into a pretty clear 3-act structure. I don't even know if they intended for that in the movie.
I mean, they almost had to have.
After this, any wish he ever makes that doesn't come true, gonna piss him off.
He's gonna be furious the rest of his life. Anytime he makes a wish after that. Because if for 3 wishes in a row you wish to be big, then you were big for 6 weeks, and in that 6-week time you also wished to have sex the first time, and then that happened, then you switch back to being a kid, and life is hunky-dory? No. Anytime from there on, you make a wish, and it doesn't happen, you're super pissed off.
Just ruined as a person.
Oh, yeah.
Spoiled beyond belief. Yes. Well, before we move on to what we're here to talk about, Little, the last thing I want to say about Big is, I talked about how basically perfect it is. And because I was so impressed with that, this time I eventually started watching with a critical eye, or attempted to just sort of pick out anything that didn't flow for me. And there's only 2 things. And the first one I made peace with. The first one is the moment where he's in the limo with Susan. Mm-hmm. And she says she'd love to see where he lives. And so they decide they're going to go to his place. Then it cuts to a wide shot of the limo coming to a screeching halt and then reversing full speed down a one-way street. It just took me out of it for a moment. I eventually made peace with it because, like, okay, I guess it's her driver, and maybe they have a understanding that if she wants to sleep with a guy, he's got to step on it. But it just seems so unnecessary. I didn't understand why that was in there.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I've always interpreted it as the driver heard it and was like, I got to get this guy laid.
He just really, I guess he did offer him the food, so he must really like him. Yeah. All right. This is a good one, Susan.
Yeah.
So I did make peace with that one. The only thing that remains that I don't think works as well as it could have is the sequence where Josh is going around to all the places of his youth as an adult and sort of looking at them longingly before he decides he wants to go back. I see what they were going for. I just think putting him there in that creepy trench coat, just standing and watching other people live their lives, like, it just looks weird, first of all. And secondly, sort of because they felt like they probably had to avoid the sadness, he doesn't go home. He doesn't look at his crying mom or Billy or anything. It's just like a weird bunch of like places that he's just like looking at the idea of childhood in general. It was a little strange. I don't know how necessary that was.
it's even a swerve at the beginning of that segment too, because he starts off walking down that street and you're like, is he going to go back home? And like as an adult? And then it's just some street, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
I also remember even as a kid thinking it was weird the way it's cut, where there's a scene of him looking at Cynthia Benson and her brother and her boyfriend and all those kids that you remember from the fair early on. Then it cuts to him throwing a baseball. And I remember as a kid, you're like, is he throwing a ball at that car full of kids? But then it goes into a baseball sequence, but you still don't even see anyone interact with the ball that he threw. It's a weird shot.
Yeah, that sequence is really weird. It almost makes me feel like the studio made them put that in because some test screenings came back like, well, he doesn't make a clear move that he wants to do. And it's like, yeah, he says he wants to go home to Susan. Like he gets vulnerable and he hits like that's the moment. You don't need creepy trench coat sequence.
Yeah, and you also have Billy yelling at him and telling him what's what. Like that's the catalyst. You don't need another catalyst. Yeah. So yeah, I would say you cut that scene and you pretty much got a perfect movie. And now that we've talked about such an excellent film, let's keep the good times rolling and move on to Little. Now, this is as I said, a spiritual sequel, and it is that in a cooler way than most things. The origin story of this movie is super cool. Marsai Martin, I should have looked up how to pronounce her name. I hope that's correct. But the 14-year-old girl who stars as young Jordan in Little is a supporting cast member on the show Blackish. She's one of the daughters. When she was 10 years old, saw the movie Big, went to the creator of Blackish, Kenya Barris, and essentially pitched him the idea of making this movie, sort of the reverse of Big, starring her. And as a result, when they agreed, she became the youngest executive producer ever on a Hollywood production at 14 years old. Really cool.
Yeah. And
I have to say, before we get into the things about it that maybe don't work, she is by far the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
Her performance is impressive. She's charming. When I think about this in comparison to Big, which, I mean, Tom Hanks was already pretty successful, but Big got him his first nomination. It was absolutely a performance movie in which his excellent work was bolstered by a good quality movie. This was a huge feature for her and did a lot to show her skill. It just, nothing around her supported that in any way, shape, or form that worked. And it's sad to think that to look at Big as an inspiration for this and then do what they did, it's like they weren't even trying to hit the same mark of quality. I understand they were probably trying to give it their own voice, but I think both things could have been done and better.
Well, I mean, I agreed to do the podcast. Then you told me what movie we would be watching. This is a movie that I saw the trailer for. I had heard that news about that girl, like it being her idea and the youngest executive producer and all of that stuff, and I was like, that is awesome. I don't think I would enjoy that movie. So I had no plans to watch it. All things said, I have seen many worse movies than that. I have not enjoyed things much more than that. It's not all bad. Again, she's terrific in it. I really like Regina Hall normally. I'm a big Regina Hall fan, but and I guess she did pretty good at the beginning and the end of the movie or whatever, but that character, oof, man, I just wanted to punch her so fucking bad.
Yeah, I am a big Regina Hall fan. I think she's hilarious. I was not behind what she was doing in this movie. And I don't know. I mean, like, I never want to blame the actor. They're working hard. But she was, at the very least, she was not questioning what was on the page at all. because the thing that character, the dialogue that character was given was nonsense from the beginning.
I also,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that the entire movie was an anti-bullying campaign. Like, I didn't know that.
For that to be the case, I have to say the bully who is like the bully for her character, the girl who they use the same actress in her flashback sequence at the beginning to be her bully when she goes back in modern day.
Right.
That girl is so mean and so unchecked by anyone. It's as if there are no adults at the school and this girl is just running every class, running every after school activity, and they even make her racist. And she does so many awful things that like every single action she takes is a like aggressive, basically violent act of hate towards the Jordan character. And in the end, nothing happens to her. Jordan kind of like gets in her face a bit. But for her to have spent the whole movie being this sort of like face of the bully, this tormentor, and for her to go unchecked, I thought was really unsatisfying.
Yeah, I agree.
And I found that to be a trend in the whole movie. I thought everything that they set up was eventually dropped. Issa Rae's character and the guy that she had a crush on at the office never got together. That was like their whole thing. What I thought would have and could have and should have been the main plot of the movie, which at least would have been better, was her and the nerd kids. You know, her. And I thought that those kids were actually kind of effectively sweet and seemed odd and strange enough. And then, you know, I guess that is the climax of the movie, that they dance together and stuff. But it's also poorly, sloppily done. It looks like they had about 10 extras to be their audience of kids. So they just go to these really weird, tight shots of some kids clapping. And you're like, wait, do they like it or not? What's happening? Boy, I don't know. I don't even have all the examples written down of how basically everything they attempted in this movie, they either abandoned or just failed. It was much worse than I thought it would be. And I don't really see why it had to be that bad. It didn't. They could have spent a little more time on it. I mean, the way it seemed like they were just shooting this movie for like an hour every day after they shot something else real. Like it was like a secret project that they were all pitching in time for. It felt like they were just like, they would get to set and go, but here's what I want to do today. Let's do a dance sequence. Okay, sure. Yeah. Like, sorry. There's the scene where they're in the restaurant and she wants to drink and Issa Rae won't let her drink. And then it just sort of like jump cuts in the scene to her singing on the bar, and I don't know if she's supposed to be drunk or not.
Yeah.
And then they just sing.
Yeah.
Just so unearned.
Yeah, almost everything in the movie is unearned. I mean, like, even the climax at the dance thing, because she doesn't spend enough time with those kids, it doesn't mean anything to me as a viewer seeing them succeed at the dance. It also, like, her switching back didn't really feel super earned.
No. I don't even remember how it happened, because I know the girl with the wand doesn't do it.
No, she just wakes up the next day, and it's only 2 days. She's only in the kid body for 2 days, and that's how happy she is, like, afterward. It was just like, you were...
Yeah.
For 48 hours you were a child. Tom Hanks was that way for 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think it justifies her. I don't think she did learn anything.
No,
really, when I think about it. Had everything been the same, but just grounded, I would have at least, like, probably not as much as Big, but enjoyed this as a spiritual sequel to Big, because it's like, fine, yeah, like if it's a different universe, it's a different person. I like it being a black woman. I like it being an adult to a kid, but nothing is grounded from moment one. So who cares? Yeah. Who cares that there's magic? Who cares that there's comedy? It's all nuts from beginning to end.
Yeah. Even the first initial whiff, like why did that one even happen?
Right. Because in the end they established that girl was not magic.
Mm-hmm.
And it works in Big for them to keep it vague. It's a magical machine. We know that it's magic because it has to be unplugged. I don't want any more. I don't need any more. Then that is an explanation. But you can't just whatever. And the rules just whatever. Also, what is fun about Big is watching an adult act like a kid. What would be fun about Little? Kid acting like an adult, maybe? Yeah, she does. And she's great. But that's not where the fun of it comes from. She never gets to use her adultness to do anything in the kid world because she doesn't spend any time in the kid world.
Right.
She just hangs out with the other star of the movie who it's like, why is this person here?
Right. It almost felt like they had to put an adult in the movie to take care of the kid. Otherwise, how is the kid just running around?
Yeah, I still think even just one sequence of addressing that concept where you see how the kid figures it out, way more fun.
Sure. No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I bet.
No,
I'm
yeah.
just saying it was probably like a studio thing. It was like, we can't promote kids like going out and running around pretending they're adults.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for what it's worth, I guess I can tell that they probably had fun on set because you can tell that they left in everything that was improvised. They left in everything that was a suggestion from someone behind the camera going like, say this line. Then they say the line, leave it in. It's just too much of people like throwing things at the wall. It's like they're making 10 different movies at the same time, not committing to any one. All that being said, I did think Mikey Day was pretty hilarious. And it was kind of bizarre, really, for something like a whole character to work because nobody else had that.
And again, the little girl was really good. And amazing props to her for getting a movie made that she pitched when she was 10. I mean, granted, it took 4 years for it to happen, but still, fuck. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Like, well done. Keep doing things because it's only going to keep getting better from there. If you already get your first movie made at 14, a theatrical release feature film at 14.
Yeah.
That was your idea. Like, it's only going to go up from there.
Yeah. And she earned every bit of it. I mean, she was everything that part could have needed and that you could have wanted from that character. Like, I just wish it was a different script. I mean, maybe if she was older, maybe there would have been a little bit more of a quality check on the situation. The filmmakers behind it, the writer-director, this was her first directorial outing. Probably a part of where the Leave Everything In came from. But she also wrote Drumline, ATL, and What Men Want. I've only seen Drumline, but it's pretty good. And then her co-writer was Tracy Oliver, who wrote Girls Trip, which I also haven't seen, but gets a lot of praise. I always had an itch to watch this movie. Just anything being called a spiritual sequel to Big, I probably would have eventually come around to it. But yeah, it wasn't. I wouldn't recommend it. That's for sure.
I enjoyed aspects of it, but as a whole, I did not.
Another thing I thought of that they did really poorly, the transformation scene itself, the reveal scene, which is such a classic in Big. It has so many small moments in it. They like kind of skip it in Little. They have her look at herself and then say, I need coffee. And then they try to give it to you again later. It was just very unsatisfying. I did not care for that choice.
Yeah. I honestly, I didn't necessarily notice it a whole lot when she went little, but when she went back, it's like, your glasses aren't that fucking dirty. You clearly can see that you've aged 35 years.
Well, I also wish, just for the sake of having it in there was a clarification line about whether or not she got LASIK or what happened. Because they don't spend any time with that at all.
Yeah.
And they didn't do anything when she woke up as a kid where, like, she needed her glasses, like, couldn't see or anything like that. That was very confusing and disappointing.
Yeah. It was like you were close to solving a Rubik's Cube, and then your asshole older cousin came in and fucked it all up, and then gave it back to you.
It's like the end.
Yeah, there it is.
That's what it's supposed to look like. Well, all right. I guess it's about to become our turn to try at doing a little bit better. I always lead into these pitches with the questions that I like to ask. First being, should this movie, Big, have a sequel?
No. Did I answer it quick enough?
Yeah, no, I mean, boy, would I have been blown away if you'd said yes. But it's just a big fat no. I mean, this movie does everything you could possibly want it to do. And it kind of comes with my pitch. Any further exploration into these characters' lives, it makes the whole picture darker. It's hard to not have to address some of that stuff if you come back.
That's very true.
I didn't try to do a spiritual sequel because, sort of like I said, I'm okay with everything they did with Little on paper. So mine is more of a direct sequel. In fact, my main pitch is it would have to have been shot within like 3 years of the first one.
Oh, okay. Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So do you want to go first? You have 2 pitches. So do you want to hit me with one and then I'll go and then you go, or how do you want to do this?
All right. Yeah. I'll warm up with the more family friendly option. You just want me to jump into it?
Oh, yeah. Yes, please. The floor is yours. Take it away.
What's he got?
So Josh becomes like, so we flash forward to Josh at like, I don't know, 22, and he finds out that before he switched back to being a kid, he knocked Susan up and has a child. I don't have much past that. It's just,
Okay.
Hijinks afterward. The other one is a little bit more complicated, but yeah, that's just the shell of the idea, right?
That's great. And I'm going to use that as a transition into my pitch here, because I did use that same idea. For mine, hopefully it's not too much. Bear with me. Okay.
Are we ready?
On Josh Baskin's 21st birthday, he goes and finds Susan to declare his love for her, because he's always held a candle. He hasn't been able to let her go, but finds that she is married to a man her own age. Ted Danson is my dream casting.
Okay.
And has a 7-year-old son. She lets him down gently, explaining that she will always love him, but this just isn't what either of them needs. So, heartbroken, and still, 21, an adult, but still young, on his way back home, he comes across a Zoltar machine. Now, this time, he misses the first shot into Zoltar's mouth. And I'm not, it could be like a act of nature thing, like the ground shakes or something, like where it's as if Zoltar is doing it himself. But then he sinks another quarter and wishes that he was I think the way he would phrase it is something like, I want to be what she needs, or something like that. And the fortune card that comes out reads, your wish will be granted. 9 years later, Josh celebrates his 30th birthday. So now he looks as old as he did in the first movie. Uh-huh. He's still friends with Billy, Kevin Bacon, with his hair dyed red.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Who's now a high school gym teacher, as well as has his own crappy rock band that he does in his free time on the evenings and weekends. And I sort of picture there being a dialogue where Josh is like, man, if Coach Barnes could see you now. And Billy's like, turns out his job is not hard. I don't want it to be that Billy's all of a sudden an athlete. He's just has a day job.
Right.
Anyway, Josh also has a girlfriend whom he seems comfortable and happy with, named Donna, Jamie Lee Curtis. Ideal casting for that one. Uh-huh. So that night, the night of his 30th birthday, Josh is confronted by his mother, who now recognizes him as the man she believed took her boy all those years ago. She reads him the letter that he sent back to her, just because that letter's so, I wanted to put it under a microscope again, and asks what really happened to him. So he tells her the whole story. Meanwhile, Susan and Rick, who is the Danson character, are having trouble with their now 16-year-old son, Mac, who I named him Mac just as sort of like a nod to the Macmillan boss from the first one. Mac has closed himself off from both of his parents, especially Rick, and keeps getting into trouble at school. He seems to be falling in with a group of angry-seeming antisocial types who are all dressed in dark clothes. That night, the school library is set on fire. And when Mac gets home, there are several clues that lead Susan to believe that he was involved, but he won't talk to her about it. So she needs help. The next morning, Josh wakes up next to Donna as his 16-year-old self, still played by David Moscow, just 3 years older. It's an awkward, comical scene that ends with her kicking him out. So he goes to see his mom, who sees her now 16-year-old son again in front of her eyes. Together, they figure out that this has to do with the wish he made regarding Susan, and they go to see her. From there, a plan is formed that results in Josh enrolling in high school and befriending Mac in hopes of helping him reconnect with his parents before it's too late. Billy is both of their gym coach, and I'm seeing that there's, a fun gym class scene in which Billy sort of helps them get an edge over the other kids, and, he's, of course, in on what's going on. Donna also comes in on what's going on because Mrs. Baskins explains everything to her. And Josh, falls victim to all the classic pitfalls of teenage life, bullies, popularity, all that stuff. I want there to be a scene where he's helped along to get popular. He has to get popular for some reason by Donna introducing herself to a bunch of the popular guys as his girlfriend.
Right.
Which, would of course earn all their respect. Josh successfully connects with Mac, and I went a little Saved by the Bell here. Connects with Mac and comes to find that a large source of his and his gang of friends' rage is linked to an orphaned homeless girl who is expelled for breaking and entering when she was caught sleeping in the library. That's why they burned that down. He and his friends have all taken turns letting her secretly sleep at their houses. So, getting this information from Josh, Susan patches things up with Mac by coyly acknowledging that she's known about the girl and that she should ask the girl down to dinner with them the next time she's there. I want this to lead to a scene in which Rick and Susan are seated at the dinner table waiting for Mac to come down, and then Mac comes down with the girl, and Rick, who is of course behind on all of this stuff, is really blown away, and especially blown away by how comfortable Susan seems with it. But basically, in general, I just want Ted Danson to be this likable goof who doesn't really know what's going on the whole movie.
Sure.
The film climaxes with Josh and Mac talking the more aggressive and hot-headed leader of the teen gang out of putting fire to the whole school. In this scene, as a way of talking him down, Max reveals that he's never known his real father. Billy further helps the aggressive kid by encouraging him to put his aggression into both football and rage rock music. So Billy bonds with that guy. And then Josh finds out he's Mac's dad. He knocked Susan up when he was 13. She didn't know how to tell him. She didn't want to burden him as a young man, even when he came to see her. So then, in the end, Josh witches himself back to normal and remains a part of Susan, Rick, and Mac's life, secretly as the kid's father. And then Mrs. Baskins, as his grandmother, also still connected with that whole family. And then I want there to sort of be an epilogue scene in which Rick Danson, once again, who is sort of again, he's behind everybody, doesn't know what's going on, but he's able to put together that something is special about the Zoltar machine. Mm-hmm. So he goes to make a wish on it, and then Susan being oh, here, let me help you, plugging the machine in before he makes the wish so that she knows that whatever he does, it won't come true, and it's just sort of stops the cycle of madness. Right. So that in a pretty long nutshell is my pitch, and I call it small.
Oh,
for lack of not being able to call it little. So yeah.
Yeah, that's way more in depth than you led me to believe I needed to go.
It's longer than I would have liked, but I think I just maybe I ran out of time. In terms of editing stuff.
With that.
Well, I kept running into
time with that. What is that?
Well,
three fucking college rule sheets of paper.
I kept running into plot holes that would send me back. One of them that I sort of just had to let go after a while was how can Tom Hanks play 21 and 30? And the only solution I was able to come up with was it's like a Boyhood, that Boyhood movie where they're shooting things in different decades, and you just have Colin Hanks play 21-year-old Tom Hanks. But that would mean that in 1991, Tom would have to be like, oh, my kid looks enough like me. He'll be perfect for this in about 10 years. So, yeah, probably an impossible movie, but that's...
Well, I'll flat out tell you that my main idea is an impossibility 100% at any point in time. I tell you, and this is not my main pitch, but if you're gonna make a sequel to Big, the way to do it is through the Zoltar.
I see. So it is a spiritual sequel, but more direct in that the Zoltar remains the source of the magic.
Right. You could call it Wish.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. I really like that. I'm trying to think if
that's not my pitch. That's off the top.
Yeah. I mean, something like a good quality version of Little with a Zoltar machine. Well, also, I know we raked across the coals already, but even the logo of Little, when you think of the logo of Big, it's simple, it's red, it's lowercase, it's iconic. You immediately know what I'm talking about. The logo for Little looked like it was written in Wingdings font and then printed on a banner and then animated. It was another mess. Probably don't need to tear down the titles guy or girl in addition to everybody else who made that movie, but I apologize about going on a little long with my pitch, but
You shouldn't apologize. Yeah. It was a good pitch. I'm glad that you did a full outline.
Okay. Logline version is he goes to help Susan's son as a 16-year-old version of himself. Yeah.
I do like that, even though it was my alt version that we both connected on Josh having knocked up Susan before he switched back.
Yeah, but I think it can work both ways. I like it as the focal point, and in mine, I like it as just sort of a, oh shit, and I mean, I didn't even think about that. Also kind of in Big style, going around the weird darkness. We'll save it to the end, and then we'll make it like a happy family reunion thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, are you ready to give your final pitch?
So,
and is this is a direct sequel?
Yes, this is going to be a direct sequel to Big.
Okay.
But it would be, much, much later.
Don't forget, look him in the eye.
The main character is going to be Billy.
Wow. Okay, it's a spin-off.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Who plays Billy?
Same guy.
Oh, Jared Rushton. Okay, cool.
So, after Big ends, something tragic happens to Josh Baskins, like horrific, like side effect of his body going big and then back to small.
Okay, go on. I'm already. Oh boy.
And it's a big time news in Jersey. Big time news. So Billy and his family, which we haven't seen, are dramatically impacted by it. So they decide to move and change their names to the Thompsons. Billy becomes Ron Thompson, and they move next door to a wacky scientist who just so happens to shrink Ron Thompson.
Whoa.
I'm crossing universes with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Billy is his character from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Trying to get away from the tragic death of his former best friend and neighbor. So really, he just has the worst luck in neighbor choosing.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So he goes through the traumatic experience with his best friend Josh Baskins. Then he goes through the traumatic experience of being shrunken. He's in his mid 30s or whatever, and he's like his life has been ruined by his childhood, and he stumbles upon a Zoltar, and wishes to go back in time as into his younger body to try and fix things.
Fix things by never letting the first big happen in the first place.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
That's it.
That that is I did not see that coming from a mile away. I love what initially got me is that the magical circumstances had scientific repercussions on the board. Meaning that magic is just science. You know, we don't understand. And then, you know, furthering that by bringing them straight into Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where the science is like magic. Yeah, that really, that seals the deal.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I wonder, I don't know why I didn't wonder this before that pitch, but I wonder what happened to Jared Rushton after those roles. I mean, I like combining them into his greatest role of all time.
Well, I'll tell you even how that happened, because I just saw him in something on Disney Plus. They have this show about props from famous props from famous movies, and they have a couple of the kids come back and they found the ant head.
Oh, okay.
And he's one of the kids, and I watched that, I think, the day after you had asked me to do this, and I was like, I am tying these two together.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of a title. Back to the Shrunk the. It's almost like you got 3 acts of various sci-fi and magic in one pitch, and it is dark. Except that it's kind of light because he's trying to fix it. I mean, right. I assume he'll be successful, but it starts very dark. Just the idea of Josh Baskins going back inside and hugging his mom, and then he's like, ouch. So, Josh, what's wrong? And it sounds better than Little. It is an improvement. All right, so very different pitches. For the sake of keeping it unbiased and not without having a judge today, I'm going to use an online free fortune teller to decide our fate here. It's a yes or no question, and I'm going to put these in title by title. So the first title I'm going to do is Be Careful What You Wish For. See how that pitch goes.
Okay.
Do you like... Be careful what you wish for. Your obsession with the past is hindering your ability to see what is really going on. That doesn't sound like they bought it. That sounds like a pass.
Yeah, that sounds negative.
All right. So, do you like small? I'm just doing these in order. Yes, before it's too late. All right, that's a win. That starts with a yes. All right.
Greenlit.
Yeah. Do you like Honey, I Went Back to Big? There is something better on the horizon, so
Sounds
I
like
think that's a pass. And just to go for broke here, I'm going to put in Wish. Now, we don't have a full idea of what that would be, but just basically a Zoltar machine in a totally separate story.
Right.
You can expect money in the mail or news that someone has some money for you.
All right.
Okay, I think they bought it.
Yeah! Goodbye, Mr. Spalding!
Well, at least the one I came up with on the fly was the one it liked.
Well, I tell you what, just picturing that title in the big font, that sounds pretty good. That sounds real comfortable. I'm real comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Oof, well, awesome. Yes, this was a success. We improved on Little in many number of ways. We got dark, we got weird. I don't know what more you could ask for from an experience like this.
Yeah, that's true.
Before we wrap this recording up, anything that you'd like to plug?
I'm always popping up in the internet comment etiquette videos with Eric, and I was just recently in the Yi 500 episode for Jack's Films, so that was pretty rad.
But you are the Uniballer on Instagram. Where else? I mean, just everywhere, pretty much.
Yeah. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You can search the Uniballer and find my profile there as well. But Shawn Kohne really on YouTube.
Awesome. Cool. Just a further plug for Shawn's personal projects is Supercuts, and it goes beyond Supercuts what you do. It's sort of hard to encompass in one word. So if you're looking for a crazy and often surprising good time, I would definitely check out the Uniballer content. Yeah.
Oh, and I do even have a Hanks related video that I put out earlier this year. It's a clip of Hanks from The Burbs watching Mr. Rogers on television, but I took out Mr. Rogers and put in Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers, so it's Hanks watching Hanks.
Oh, it's wonderful. He was a real good looking guy.
Oh yeah.
I guess he still is. It's just, I bet he pulled in his day.
Yeah. If you want to get fratty about it.
Objectify Tom Hanks with me, bro. Perfect amount of chest hair, biffy, filled out those kitty undies real well. On the next follow-up Showdown. The movie we were talking about today, 1995's House Guest. My guests today are Derek Luchin and Jack Seaver McDonald. Should this movie have a sequel?
No, it shouldn't have had an original.